Hey everyone, Sean and Dave here from Saturday Morning Cartoons. We need to thank the following amazing people for going to our Patreon account and supporting this show. So a huge thank you to
Jonathan Renteria Elye,
John Helter,
Jack Connolly,
Derek Haynes,
Alex Kazanis,
Jarmaine Myrick,
Tyrese Walton,
Allison Keene,
Dr. Jason Woods,
the wonderful Melanie Harker,
the incomparable Sean Paul Ellis.
oh, and the phenomenal David Trumbore.
Thank you so much. Now, you guys might wonder why we are thanking ourselves and some familiar names of the podcast. It's because we want you to know that we not only appreciate your donations to the podcast here, but we are actually putting in our hard-earned dollars as well. So to give you guys an idea of what you can actually get for some of these monthly contributions through Patreon, if you can't contribute any money whatsoever, we would love it if you guys would just visit patreon.com/SaturdayMorningCartoons. Remember, that's morning with a U. And just share that link out among your social media pages. That would help us out a lot and just get the word out there. If you do want to kick in a couple of bucks, you get some cool stuff back in return. So you may not know that we send out a monthly newsletter that not only tells people about upcoming news that we have going on, and we've definitely got some cool stuff coming in the next couple of months here for you, but we'll also announce the upcoming list of shows that we're going to be covering. So if there's a cartoon out there that you actually like, you're going to get to hear about it in the monthly newsletter. Other than that, you also get special thank yous in the newsletter. You get a special shout out like this one right here in each and every episode. You can get early access to weekly episodes, and you can also get access to our special behind the scenes rambling between Sean and myself.
Oh boy.
Yeah, there's some gems in there. So you're going to want to check that out. Again, head on over to patreon.com/SaturdayMorningCartoons to do so. And thank you so much to everyone who is a current patron.
Thank you to our patrons. Thank you so much for listening. And now, on with the show.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Cartoons, the weekly podcast that revisits, reviews, and ridicules some of the world's weirdest animated series. Coming to you from the Hall of Justice, I'll be your co-host, Dave Trumbore. Joining me as always from the Rogues Gallery, it's Sean Paul Ellis. How's it going, Sean?
Hey, David. I'm doing well, buddy. How about yourself?
Doing good, man, but I feel like we got a tough one on tap today, and I don't know if we can do it ourselves. I don't know if we can do it justice.
I don't think that we can do it justice. In fact, in order to bring it home, we've assembled a squad over here to be able to make this happen. And so, not a suicide squad.
Oh, thank God.
Real rough. Thank God.
They might feel like this is like pulling teeth. I wasn't gonna say it's like suicide. I just think
a good but awkward.
It gets dark real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have returning friend of the show, director of Crowded Elevator Pictures, Tony Lazzaroni is joining us.
Hey everybody, how you doing?
Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you for coming back, Tony.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And we also have, new to the show, we have DC-based performer Joe Randazzo. Joe Randazzo with his first episode.
Hey everybody, how you doing?
Ooh, welcome to the show. So why are you guys joining us today? What's going on? What are we talking about today?
So we are discussing the Justice League in Super Friends. You like that? You really pulled that
Halfway
around.
through, you kind of gave up on it, but you recovered nicely.
Yeah, Justice League in Super Friends. They bought the rights to Justice League and then renamed it Super Friends. And it was a Hanna-Barbera cartoon from the 1970s. And it ran for a little while. So Sean's got some more background on it, I assume. Right? I mean, you did your homework on it.
We always assume.
Yeah, always assume with me, please. So Super Friends is an American animated television series which ran from 1973 to 1986 on ABC as a part of its Saturday morning cartoon lineup. It was produced, as Joe had mentioned, by Hanna-Barbera and was based on the Justice League of America and the associated comic book characters published by DC Comics. The name of
every other Hanna-Barbera comic or show from that era. Let's just say that's the other side of this, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. The name of the program has been variously represented as the world's greatest Super Friends, the all-new Super Friends Hour, Challenge of the Super Friends, and more at different points in its broadcast history. There were a total of 109 episodes, wow, and 2 backdoor pilot episodes of the new Scooby-Doo movies, which featured Batman and Robin appearing in the dynamic Scooby-Doo affair and the Caped Crusader caper.
I was really hoping that last one would be a tongue twister for you, but you did pretty good.
Oh, thanks.
Did a good job.
I appreciate it.
Hey, have you guys heard of like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman before? I don't know if you have. I feel like they might be kind of niche.
I might have picked it up at one point.
Picked them up. Okay.
I think I saw a movie about it recently.
Yeah, there's a couple out there.
And I cried all the way through it.
I really want to talk to what you think a Super Friends version of Justice League movie would look like in this day and age.
Like this cartoon turned into a Justice League movie.
Oh yeah, like Zack Snyder's
would cause
Super
a riot.
Friends.
Just Jesus, it would be awful.
It would be better than Superman v Batman, though. Or
Yeah,
Batman
all right.
v Superman
Can I just
would-
say something like slightly on topic but off topic? I liked Batman v Superman because I only saw the the extended edition. With the extra like half hour, like I waited for the extended edition to come out and paid like $20 for it, which I was annoyed about. But the extended edition actually is like, wow, that makes coherent sense. Everything seems logical. And then I went back and saw what they cut out, and I was like, no, that's the whole crux of the movie. How could you cut that out? And then none of this would make sense. So I don't know what edition you guys saw, but if you watch the actual extended edition with nothing else, it's like, oh, this is a decent, if not long movie.
So you don't like Batman v Superman? You like the extended edition of
Yes,
Batman v
I
Superman?
like the non-theatrical cut of Batman v Superman.
I will say this: the first thing I watched was the extended edition, and it was still just like a steaming pile of crap. Like it made slightly more sense than the edited version, which was completely
That's
incomprehensible. But watching the extended version, I was just like, this is just garbage. Like this did not deserve to be made, and I feel bad for everyone involved. But this is a debate that has been raging since it released, and will continue to debate. So we're gonna walk on the lighter side with Super Friends. But go ahead, you had a comment to make, Joe?
But don't you feel like the level of this movie is so terrible, like lowered your expectations so much that at that point you were like, yeah, I guess it's fine.
I did not find anything fun about it personally. But
Fine,
also because of
not fun.
my daily grind, this was in my face pretty much 24/7 for like 6 months ahead of it. So it kind of wears me down ahead of time. So when it does show up, I expect it to be like make sense, be entertaining, and leave me wanting to watch it again. And I got none of those things out of it. So to each their own. To each their own.
I think the challenging thing for me was that after watching BVS, it sort of eroded my expectations to the point where when I finally saw Suicide Squad, I was like, oh, this is kind of fun.
Oh, see, I was the exact opposite. I was
Yeah,
like,
no, I'm kidding. Like, they're all not great.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was like,
Wonder
Woman's
Woman
great.
was good. Wonder Woman was good.
Unless you're James Cameron.
okay, well, can I
Yeah, right.
can I give a dissenting opinion on Wonder Woman?
Please.
You
Okay.
like Batman v Superman and did like
We'd
Wonder
like to
Woman.
welcome James Cameron to the
What's wrong
show.
with
James
you?
Cameron, take it away.
No, okay, hold on. You know what? No, I've given this opinion several times and it's unpopular. So, and it gets me called names that I don't need to be called
No, get
in a
into
live
it.
thing. No, I just like, it was fine. And I saw it at a drive-in theater with my son who refused to go to sleep at 2:00 in the morning. So he was like literally climbing on top of me, and he was a 3-year-old. So it wasn't the best experience. So I'll start there. But I don't like, so here's my real problem with it. I don't like coming of age stories where the hero is stupid. And I didn't like the fact that she was like, what is this? What world of man is this? And it's like, don't you do this? And it's like, hey, all right, lady, like you're Wonder Woman. You speak like 30 languages. Why don't you, and you read all these books on everything. It's like, I wanted her to be a little more capable. I thought Gal Gadot was great. I thought everything else was great, but I just wanted to see her as a more capable person. That being said, I recognize that all of the, the gender politics of it has a lot of weight, and it's a fine movie, but I wasn't blown away by it like other people were.
Fair enough. I mean,
That is
on
my-
the point of being capable, I'd argue that she's the most capable person in the movie. Just the fact that she's a fish out of water, it adds a little bit of humor to it, but I didn't think they overdid it that much with that. I do need to see it again, though. I only saw it the one time in the theaters, and I really do need to see it again before I have a more concrete opinion. Go ahead.
And I mean, that's the same reason why I didn't love Spider-Man Homecoming.
Sure.
Like I thought it was good, it was fine, but I don't really enjoy like the coming of age stories of these things. My Spider-Man was 90s Spider-Man, who's a full-grown adult and married to a supermodel. So like I want to see a capable superhero who's not brooding and awful.
Can I ask you a question? Do you like fun, though? Because it seems like from what you're saying, that like fun's not like super high on your list of things.
We've examined this in the past, and the answer is typically no.
Typically not.
Oh man, I can't wait to see your
Typically
opinion
not.
of Super Friends.
It was not high.
Hey, we agree.
Well, let's get
we
into
agree
it.
on things.
So you guys probably out there know DC Comics. You know the holy trinity of DC Comics. But if you need to know like what Super Friends is about, I'll give you a little rundown. So as Sean mentioned, this thing ran for like over a decade. There were a number of iterations. Early on, Super Friends focused on far-fetched schemes of mad scientists and aliens who were invariably revealed as being well-intentioned and simply pursuing their goals through unlawful or disreputable means. Typically, at the end of each story, a peaceful and reasonable discussion would be performed by the heroes to convince the antagonist to adopt more reasonable methods. The all-new Super Friends Hour departed somewhat from the previous series' formula by featuring villains using more elaborate methods to further their goals. As a rule, they could not be reasoned with, requiring the heroes to use direct force to stop them. Beginning with Challenge of the Super Friends, several of the heroes' arch-villains from the comic books, such as Lex Luthor and the Riddler, began to feature prominently in comic-style stories. Throughout the series, plots often wrap themselves up neatly in the final minutes of an episode in the fashion of the typical comic books and Sean's favorite, Deus Machina. So it's interesting to see that over the course of like the 13 years or whatever this was on the air, that they went from generic villains, people that didn't really exist in the comics, almost like I guess the comics did early on before they had these arch villains. But then they eventually were like, oh, we've got this entire like Legion of Doom to pull from, so how about we start using these guys as well? But for the episode we're talking about today, we don't get to see any like familiar villains at all. We get to see some very interesting depictions and suggestions for who our superpowered friends are going to go face. So go ahead, Sean, I'll let you take it away. Yeah.
For today's show, we watched an episode of Super Friends from 1973 that was titled The Planet Splitter, and this was episode 15. So this was, as Dave had mentioned, was sort of the synopsis. This was well before they had started pulling in some of the more notorious villains, where they were actually talking things out during some of these episodes. Now, Joe, you made this recommendation for this specific episode, and there was a reason behind it, correct?
Yes. So in 2001, I snapped my leg playing football, and when I got home from the surgery on my leg, I snapped my tibia fibia, which is not fun. They gave me lots of Percocets, and basically I was in bed for about a week. I had Boomerang at that time, and Boomerang ran a Super Friends marathon for like 4 days over the weekend. So I watched Super Friends on Percocets for basically 3 or 4 days straight. Now, to be fair, that's how I remember it. It may not have been that long. It may have been just 2 or 3 episodes that felt like it dragged on for that time. But it was awful. And when you are high and still like, man, this doesn't make any sense, you have a problem.
So I just want to clarify, you are recommending to people out there to watch all DC Comics cartoons and movies on some sort of medication, correct? Okay.
I mean, at this point, you have to.
I can attest to that whole thing with the medication, because I had closed reduction surgery on my ankle because I broke it when I was in high school, and they put me under in like my normal like room. That's where they applied the anesthesia, and their MTV was playing and Moby's Body Moving video was on, and so I heard that song the entire time that I was out. That was just playing like over and over and over in my head. And when I woke up, my ankle was fine, but I hated Moby. So,
oh god. So I wanna ask really quick, Tony. since you are on the show tonight, did you have any exposure? Did you have any understanding of Super Friends before you had this conversation with Joe?
I was aware that the show existed. I didn't necessarily know anything about the show as the premise and that sort of thing. I'd seen, little clips and stuff like that, but I never actually watched a full episode. I was aware of who the Super Friends are. I know DC Comics. I've got a background in, comics in general. So that much I understood. And I've seen enough Hanna-Barbera content to know how much was completely ripped off to incorporate into this show. But no, the show in and of itself, I didn't know inside out or upside down, anything like that.
And so when we were talking about this last night, you had mentioned that you were kind of looking at this from the point of view of a director and sort of what do we have in store then that we can kind of get excited about for later in this episode?
I don't know if it's excitement related, but in the early part of the episode, there's a whole section where they're in the Super Friends fortress, or I don't know what they technically call it, but
the Hall of Justice.
Hall of Justice. Thank you. But they had weird names for everything. The computer still is the one that cracks me up the most. The
Trouble.
What was it? The
Troublert
computer with the lightning logo on it, so you knew that it was new and fancy. But no, the thing that got me was in that whole scene. It's basically like the person who was drawing it watched the movie Citizen Kane and tried to rip off as many of the depth tricks and stuff like that, where you have one character's head taking up the right half of the frame and then the full body of the other character taking up the other half of the frame because they're standing 20 feet back. And for whatever reason, specifically putting that's supposed to be a power move. You're supposed to put the more powerful person in the foreground and the weaker person in the background. And they kept on putting Batman and Robin back in the background,
just standing there awkwardly,
and putting Wonder Woman and Superman up front. Yeah, but so it's very obvious that they have no power.
But to be fair, it sounds like that person is the only person who knew what they were doing while making this show.
And it was just for that sequence of scenes.
Because it was clear that the writers were like, I don't know who these characters are, and I'm just going to throw them in there.
Oh,
so
terrible.
Yeah, good time.
Well, getting into the show tonight then, let's start at the very beginning. Let's start with the theme song. And Joe, since you're our guest tonight, we want to start off with you and throw this over. What were your initial impressions of watching and listening to this theme song?
So the theme song's actually not bad. It's pretty decent. It's your standard superhero theme song. You see the Super Friends doing things, like Aquaman talks to fish, and literally that's what he does in the theme song. And and Superman is flying, and Batman's running, and Wonder Woman is wondering, because you see them doing things that look like they're in action or that they're going someplace, which is not something you see at all during the show. So the actual title was more interesting than the 43 minutes that followed it. I would have literally rather watched just the title on repeat for 43 times. Because was oh, here comes Aquaman's talking to fish. Oh, that shark's going to do something. Nope, Aquaman radiated waves at it. Neat. So, there you go.
Neato. Theme wise, I thought this one was. I agree with Joe. I think it was fine. The visuals, were definitely far better. But I feel like that's actually just a cartoon general thing where they always try and put together a mini bottle episode of the best clips of action from any show. The hysterical ones are the ones where it's not anything that ever occurs in the show, where they've literally just made it for that theme. And I would, part of me is interested to see if through the rest of the show you could watch through and pick up all those elements if they're actually from other episodes, or if it's something that was completely assembled just for this purpose.
Yeah, but would you really want to watch other episodes of this?
No, I don't.
Yeah, there's no reason.
That's why
just
I'm
let
curious,
it go.
But I'm
it's
not
just
that
something
curious.
that you could just forget about. You're I guess that's a question that'll go unanswered.
Life choices.
Dave, did you have any impressions from the theme song?
I mean, basically what the guys have said already. Honestly, as far as the instrumental, the song version of it, it was kind of generic. It didn't have a great hook. I don't really remember too much from it. The only good thing is that they had a roll call, but at the same time, do you really need a roll call for Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman? These are some of the most recognizable characters on the show. The only thing I will say is that they do introduce the two shitty kids and their Scooby-Doo ripoff or Astro Mutt ripoff, whatever you wanna call it. Dino Mutt
Yeah.
and Astro. I'm combining the Jetsons with whatever that other cartoon show was, but like they do kind of throw those idiots in at the end to be like, it's fun for kids, which I hated. So go ahead, Sean.
Can I just say that is pretty typical Hanna-Barbera bullshit? And I hate Hanna-Barbera. I'm going to throw that out there. I was never a Hanna-Barbera fan. I'm very sorry. Muttley's my favorite character. All right? It's just because he's smarmy looking and a dog. But it's a garbage show for I don't want to say for garbage people, but like it's a garbage. Compared to Warner Brothers, it's not even a contest. Like, I'm sorry. And it's just, ugh.
Hanna-Barbera does a lot of tropey things too that
Yes.
come up, and I've got some notes on those that they reuse the same
Background.
concepts and things over and over again.
Also, they use Casey Kasem's voice like 30 times throughout this episode, and it's such a recognizable
And
voice.
not differentiated in any way, shape, or form. He's never doing any sort of an accent or
No
anything.
accent.
It's just Casey Kasem, and at any point in time, he might present.
I just kept waiting for him to like count down the top 10 songs of 1973. It just didn't, as like Batman, but it didn't work.
And the one thing I noticed is that the voice of Wonder Mutt, or whatever the useless dog was, is done by Frank Welker, who is Megatron.
He's one of the most noteworthy voiceover artists who probably voiced cartoon characters from our childhood that we don't even know, and he has been present and available. We've done cartoons where he's just done an animal and done grunts, and we're just like, yeah, we can tell that that's Frank Welker. It's so well done.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's impressive with just such a laundry list of just incredible works. And then just to be this dog in this cartoon.
It's just a useless dog.
So the one thing I do want to say about this theme song, I agree with everybody on the points that we've made. The one thing that was very interesting was that towards the very end, we get an actual mission statement for what our heroes are going to focus on, which I want to say, yeah, so we get at the very end, we talk about the fact that they're going to fight injustice. They're going to right that which is wrong. And so you get sort of this idea of, which I don't think that we see commonly in theme songs, where you sort of get and are telegraphed that message of just these heroes are doing these things. And it's very short, it's succinct, it's quick, but it's nice. It's sort of nice to set the tone.
It's a little like the A-Team's theme song.
Exactly.
Yeah, where it's like, if you need the help and there's injustice, DuckTales too.
Yeah, DuckTales as well.
Yeah. Woo! Well, if there's a stranger out to find you.
Yeah.
Or something.
Nailed it.
You just gave up halfway through that one as well.
The stranger out to find you.
There's a stranger lurks behind you.
Yeah.
What to do, just grab onto some.
DuckTales.
Yep.
Woo!
You guys mentioned
Oh,
Hanna-Barbera a bunch, so do you want to jump into the animation style? Because there are some very obvious parallels, and like Tony mentioned, tropes.
I mean, it's... Oh, God, it's so awful. I can't
Start
even.
at the beginning.
I don't even know where to start. It looks like every other Hanna-Barbera cartoon. These big fleshy blobs of no definition superheroes. And it's like, oh, here's a stupid ass dog and some kids who don't take their costumes off ever. And it's like, even though Superman's in disguise, like, think that one through, kids. Like, Superman's in disguise and you're walking around with him. People are going to put two and two together. You're in public. Get your shit together.
Well, we're going to talk about this later, but they're not exactly keeping any secrets whatsoever with the origin story. But anyway.
Yeah.
Anything else on
No,
your end,
I don't. I'm not.
I did notice that only the women get eye color.
Interesting.
Like that, they're the only ones that actually have
Yes.
pupils that are of any color. All the men have just black little dots for eyes. Some of them don't even get the white of the eye; they just get the black.
Wendy
dot
has
on the
deep
skin
blue
color.
eyes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like disturbingly deep blue eyes
Yeah.
compared to the others, which is something that's very interesting in this. They do reuse designs. I mean, the dog is a typical one. The kids are both typical designs. That there's nothing distinct. You could put them in a lineup with a bunch of other Hanna-Barbera characters, remove the outfits that they're wearing, and you would not be able to point who was from what show.
That's Super
Like,
Friends After
just
Dark
put
if
them in
you're
all
taking
the
them out
same
of their
clothes or
clothes,
something.
though. I don't know if Hanna-Barbera would like that.
That's what I'm gonna do. You can check into the SMC was it Instagram later on so that they can see the ways I'm gonna Photoshop you with the green backdrop behind you, Dave. Yeah.
Put topless Wonder Woman from Hanna-Barbera right back here if you don't mind. Preferably on a roller coaster.
Please
sure.
don't.
Yeah, that's what I was
Please
gonna do.
Please don't.
Seems like a Warner Brothers lawsuit ready to happen.
At least we'll be on their radar.
It's a work of parody. Protected.
Anything more from you, Tony?
Animation wise, not from this. I'm interested in some of the content that was made after the fact that was like poking fun at this stuff and seeing more of it that was the source material for things like Ambiguously Gay Duo and that sort of thing later on. So there were some things that I was in tune to look for in this, and those were nice.
You could really see like the cost saving measures and stuff that they were going for. So they did the kind of typical, it's very typical in like Japanese anime where you have a one still image that's fairly like detailed and well drawn, that the camera just kind of like pans across it for as long as they can conceivably do that to eat up a bunch of screen time without actually animating anything. They did that a couple of times.
They did another thing too, where Superman is talking, and it's like when they're inspecting this. We'll get into the story, but the stolen gem, and they just cut to a shot behind Superman, and he looks over his shoulder, says like one line, and looks back, and they just hang on the back of Superman's head for another like line of dialogue, and I'm like, that was just tried. Yeah, that's some of that time of the 43 minutes we could probably cut down.
Also, one of the things that I noticed that they do a lot is, we're going to go here now. Everybody get in your car and fly away. And it's just shots of people traveling to and fro. And it's just, and basically the only thing I think Wonder Woman does in this whole episode is drive. Like, I'm just going to fly my plane, and that's it.
Well, it was very challenging when the whole thing turned into wacky races and Muttley showed up at that point. So I thought that maybe for some reason this is why you wanted this episode.
Right. It was weird.
I just the traveling thing. It's that everybody got a vehicle except for Aquaman, who just swims like hell.
I can't wait to talk about that because the narrator even calls it out explicitly. He's like, Batman and Robin got in this vehicle, Wonder Woman got in this vehicle, and here's Aquaman just fucking swimming in the ocean.
Swimming his ass off to the mid-Atlantic.
Oh my god, I can't wait to talk about this.
How did he get to shore? Like, is there an inlet behind the back of the like Justice League headquarters? Where it's like, get in the water, you're fine.
He comes up the fountain.
I want to see the first 10 minutes.
Just at some point, they're just flushing him down a toilet.
Yeah.
They're like, you'll get there eventually. Don't worry.
He's Shawshanking his way through. Like,
I want to see the mutated fish he met in the sewer system. Had a conversation with. That's his bus depot. That's his train station interaction. It's going through the sewer system and talking to the fish down there.
Man, but talking about the production quality of this thing, just there was still some like just really wonky animation just from them, just walking from place to place. Their action poses, which like we said were recycled over and over. Batman just standing in the background awkwardly sometimes. I don't know why he was like posed in such a way to make him look like his bones were detached.
The high waist hand on the hip thing. That was
and then the dialogue.
I'm fine with
too.
that.
The dialogue sync was awful, and I think it's because they just reused a bunch of scenes over and over again. So they had scenes of the people talking, but they crammed different dialogue in just so they could use them over and over. So not great.
It's very weird that you bring up the high hand on the waist, because that's like a Superman power pose, is to put your hands on your waist. And then they give it to Batman, but it's like they were just like, no, we need to go higher. Yeah. We need to get higher.
He's standing there.
Like, it's almost like they were trying to make a Batwing. Like, they were trying to make a Batwing out of what his arms were. It was off-putting.
I occasionally find myself doing that. Like, just like, not like on hip, but like mid, like rib, like, and I just sit and I just be like, this is super effeminate pose right here, and I just bring it back down.
All right, Josh is doing it, and even that was better though. And I think this is why the Superman one works, is that he's doing it with a closed fist.
And Batman
had the open hand. That was the weird thing. Is just having the open hand just looks, I don't know.
And then his dialogue with Robin, not the best.
Wait,
so,
are you sure it wasn't the best
into
from this show? Because I'm pretty sure it was the best on this episode.
All right. It depends on your frame of reference here. So, but I think we'll get into it.
I think the final thing just about the animation style that was really off-putting to me as we transition into characters, that this is applicable for all of these characters, is just, as we talked about, the flesh-colored eyes. We have certain characters that have colored pupils, and then instead of having whites of their eyes, they are just the same color as the skin and the flesh tone that's around them. And it is immediately noticeable and extremely off-putting to just have people with those kind of eyes, and because they focus on them a lot and you see them move around. It seems like the only person who actually has consistent whites of their eyes is this wonder dog, and he has the derpiest faces that he makes over and over and over again, and it's to the point where I'm like, his eyes aren't going in the same direction ever. It's creeping me out. I'm like, this dog has seen some shit and should just maybe relax. Maybe this dog should not be a working animal at this point. Maybe this dog
Forrest Whitaker of dogs.
Oh, no. You mean
the
ghost
last
dog?
king of Scotland of dogs.
Ghost dogs are really cool.
Yeah, ghost dog. The way of the Justice Friends. Who give a shit.
But speaking of the Justice Friends, like, do we even need to talk about the characters? Normally, when we talk about characters on this show, it's to introduce characters people have no idea who they are. Is there anybody who specifically jumps out that you like? Maybe a new character that only shows up for this episode, or characters that aren't part of the DC Comics? Go ahead.
So I think the thing that's important to note, and we've talked about this already, is that we have 3 characters that are specific for this show that they actually premiered in this Super Friends 1973 show, and then became future canon in Teen Titans
As
and
like side characters.
Correct.
Yes.
And so sort of in the similar sense that Barbara Gordon is the Oracle after her run-in with the Joker, and sort of like being able to process information and give information to Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah, in the Killing
Joke, yeah.
This is the moment where you have these characters, at least the male and the female character, Wendy and Marvin, they become a character that is called Proxy, that passes information off to the Super Friends and the Teen Titans.
And I want to remind people, if they're listening, and you think you know who Wendy and Marvin are, I want to caution you, because in this version of the show, they are not, I think, who you think they are. They're not the Wonder Twins, because the Wonder Twins came later in Super Friends, and they dressed up in purple, and one turned into a hawk and the other turned into a bucket of water. So like they had actual powers. These are 2 non-powered individuals who Superman feels comfortable putting in danger for no reason.
I love his parenting skills in this episode.
One of them caped for some God unknown reason.
With a homemade costume, like his Halloween
there's something
costume.
wrong with
there's
him?
very much something wrong with him.
And Superman is just like really pandering to him for
It
no
explains the
real
service
reason.
dog.
Like maybe he killed his parents or something. Yeah, and there's a service
Explains a
dog.
lot.
It's like, sure, buddy, you can wear a cape. You can wear whatever you want today.
You can go to the circus, sure. Have a
Good
time.
job, Marvin. Yeah. Here's some quarters. Try and awkwardly flail.
Would you like to win a Cupid doll?
Yeah.
Who wants to get this
I like that
Cupid
maybe
doll?
he did have a
And
power.
then a
He had like
gorilla-
a bottomless pocket. He kept
Jesus.
pulling out one last quarter. So maybe he did have some sort of like hammer space thing going on. I don't know.
He has an amazing power
Yeah.
to waste money. That's what his
great.
power is.
Oh, that's Batman's power.
Oh, he wasted a good amount on Robin.
Oh boy.
So we have these characters. We have Wendy, we have Marvin, we have this dog. Joe, any specific insight that you have, because these are the new characters that we have. Style, demeanor, anything about them that jumped out to you?
I mean, they're obviously there just to be the audience stand-in. You know, it's a kid's cartoon. They're there just for the same reason, really, that sidekicks were always there in the beginning, which was to make kids feel like they could be part of this action. That's why Bucky was made in the 40s. That's why Robin was made. And it's kind of the same thing that you were talking about before, Dave, where this almost harkens back to like, hey, we're going to start this all over again for animation, and we're not going to learn anything until really like the 2nd or the 3rd season about how we should make this. So I think that's why they put them in there. They're just stand-ins for the audience, for kids. and they're useless.
The weird part is that they do most
And
of the
I-
action in this plot. Like the superheroes are just kind of like you mentioned, standing, traveling, or just standing again in a different place. It's really strange how little they actually do in this entire 43-minute episode, while the kids are doing most of the in between stuff.
I mean, it is just a lot of just standing around or the same pose held, which is going back to the Hanna-Barbera animation style. It's just trying to cut down the cost and make it so that it's as cheap as possible to produce, yet feels action-packed, and just doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, and they constantly they demand at one point to be dropped off at a bus station.
At literally
Several
any
times.
state or any city.
At any city in America, just drop us off at a bus station, please.
Different times.
You're like, this is and then like they're committing the bad guys are committing a crime. They're standing next to him, and I think she literally says, "I protest," and like it's some sort of courtroom battle.
While in a UFO.
It's like, what are you doing?
Objection!
Yeah, I don't like this at all. Drop us off at a bus
But they
station.
seem like such nice, kindly
Okay, lady.
gentlemen.
Yeah.
So we've talked about these right now. So we have these two villains that, again, as we've mentioned, because this is very early on in Super Friends, these villains do not actually have any powers. Again, they are as powerful as the junior Super Friends that we have, which I love the fact that they're just like, we're junior Super Friends and associates. And I'm like, what the? Sure. Great. Wonderful law firm that you put together here. So this is also in that period of time for Super Friends where they are resolving a lot of things through discussion and sort of trying to win over these well-intentioned villains who are going about their means in an unjustified manner, where they're trying to win them over simply with words instead of fists. So we have Wilbur and Dr. Laban. Anything jump out to, and Joe will go to you, anything jump out to you about these two villains?
So I just want to point out that I think part of the reason why these episodes are so lame is because I think the standards of the day were more strict, so you couldn't have Superman or anyone actually show physical violence against people. So that's why I think most of the other episodes that I watched while high were aliens or scientists and people who were, like you said before, generally well-intentioned and could be talked down with a stern talking to. So you couldn't really have these like muscle-bound villains. You had to have your generalized science. And one was a criminal and the other was just the worst possible scientist in the world who somehow created an amazing technology and then just gave up on all common sense after that.
Tony, anything from you?
From going back to kind of animation style / character design in general, I found kind of a trope in this that I want to go back and look into, but I seem to recall like all like lead bad guys are always bald. That's something that seems, because the leader on Krypton that tells them like, no, you can't build a spaceship. Like he's got the Krusty the Clown style, like, you know, hair going out on either side of his head type look. But then the other one is Wilbur is the ugliest drawn character in the show, which I think back to, the bad guys are always like non-symmetrical and just really kind of heinous looking, and that should have tipped me off earlier. And I think maybe that's a trope in and of itself, that the ugliest person on camera is usually the bad guy. Because I mean, even these, you know, dopey little kids are still like they're symmetrical. Like they're very
Wendy's
designed.
good looking.
Yeah, I mean, well,
For like a teenager cartoon. Like if I was
No, please keep
No, keep going, Jeff.
Do you mean the internet? No, I just mean like she's pleasing to look at in a non-sexual way. That's all. I'm not gonna get any further.
No, we're just gonna leave that hanging there.
And none of us are going to respond? We're just going to let you wallow in this?
Yeah, apparently.
Let's make sure when you edit this together, you just leave a nice long
45
pause
seconds.
right there.
No, No, I mean Marvin's a good-looking kid too. He's your typical all-American kid, but Wendy has those piercing blue eyes.
Yeah, tell me how you're attracted to this dog.
I'm not
this
attracted
cartoon dog.
Let's ask this question. Are Marvin and Wendy, are they together? Or is she like his special caretaker because he's a special boy with special problems?
I thought they were brother and sister. Are they not brother
I don't know.
and sister?
I didn't look that
think
deep
they were
into
brother
it,
and sister.
to be honest.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was like maybe cousins. I don't know. I don't know that I can explain the relationship. They don't look alike enough to be brother and sister versus like the Wonder Twins that you do see later on. They're obviously brother and they're obviously
Maybe that's
twins.
what I'm confusing them
probably.
with, the Wonder Twins.
Yeah.
Who I think are brother and sister.
There's a whole
because
other
they're
set of
women.
things going on there. Yeah.
So, Dave, I want to ask in terms of Wilbur and Dr. Laban, any final thoughts that you have about these two terrible villains that are ugly and heinous to
pretty
look
generic.
at?
And honestly, they didn't even look that ugly. I mean, I agree with Tony's point that Wilbur was kind of like asymmetrical. It looked like they just like squished both sides of his face into the middle for some reason. But it wasn't even that much. They weren't that heinous that you thought they were going to be like the most vile things ever. They were just kind of generic villains. And honestly, I think going back to Joe's point, this might have been in the era of like the comics code where they kind of really cracked down on the violence and sexuality and stuff in comics, and that probably bled over into the adaptations as well. So this is probably why it's like definitely way toned down for kids, really generic, and literally not like one punch is thrown. It's just a lot of running around, standing, and talking to each other in really not exciting ways.
No, I agree. So we've talked about this and we've kind of teased at this, and I know that we all want to get into it. So allow me to kind of set the stage for this. This episode, as we have repeatedly mentioned, was 43 minutes long for no reason. And so I actually broke this episode into 4 separate pieces.
Okay, what do you got?
In my brain. The first I would call the heist. The second I would call unnecessary origin story. The third is how to adopt a child. And the fourth and final section of this, I would say, I would call really unnecessary conclusion or terrible scientific method.
I would also agree. Yeah.
I guess I'm getting a lot of nods from terrible scientific method. So, Dave, before I turn it over to you, I just want to check and see. I know that we have some questions that a lot of us want to answer, and we want to ask other people for this. So we're going to try not to go beat by beat through this entire 43-minute episode, because we would probably talk for more than 43 minutes about a 43-minute episode, which, trust me, we don't want to kill you with that kind of a recap because it's so terrible. But Dave, you had a quick question.
Actually, all I wanted to do is do a quick synopsis that kind of encompasses your 4 points and just give people an idea of what this plot is supposed to be. So that way we can kind of go through and pick out the highlights or low points and talk about them and ask questions. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me do this. If I was to get, do you have a synopsis ready,
just
Dave?
off the top of my head, it's essentially just these mad scientists are stealing diamonds from around the world. The Super Friends have to put a stop to it, and then it turns out that their plans are ultimately to destroy another planet in a system in order to bring the mineral rights into orbit around Earth. That's basically the plot of this piece of crap.
For the good of Earth.
Yes, of course, always for the good of Earth.
Yeah, for the good of
These
Earth.
misguided scientists. That's it. So now we can play in that sandbox.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Joe, I want to turn it over to you first. Because I know that you had some questions just in general about this show, and so I want to make sure that you get answers.
Sure. So my first generalized question is, did the writers know who Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, or Aquaman were, or did they just take a show about people who have cars and paint costumes on them? Because basically all they do is they go, yeah, we should go to this place. And then they spent a lot of time on logistics. Like, let's go here and you go here. And then also, my favorite part was when Batman, they're like, Batman, you go to Egypt to this tomb. And he's like, all right, I'm going to get my helicopter and go. And I was like, he's going to die in the Atlantic. Like, I don't think that's going to work out well. That's going to take forever. Like, So that was my first question.
So I want to help answer this. So a lot of the cartoons sometimes that we will watch when we have teams, like I'll use Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as an example.
Great show.
And so there are moments where you will see the turtles that kind of like snap into action, and they're just like, guys, like do this certain plan that they've already rehearsed or they've already kind of orchestrated behind the scenes through maybe training that they have. It's history that they have between their group. And so they snap into it, and you don't really need to see the logistics behind it.
Right.
Other times, we have cartoons where maybe, let's say, a group or a squad is not as well communicative as what you would want, and they jump into a battle, and they have no idea what they're doing, and they get beaten as the hero very, very quickly. And in those moments, my criticism for them is it's always like, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more planning. Like there was no understanding or idea about what they were jumping into. They just jumped into it and they immediately failed, despite saying like, we can't fail, or like, we have to do this. And so to see some of this planning, this is a corner case for me in this episode of Super Friends, because yes, sometimes it's nice to have that planning or a little bit of history. You would think that for these 4 DC comic characters in this show, icons, mainstays, like this is what franchises are built off of these days. And you would think that they would have a little bit more communication, or that they would have a little bit more history and understanding. But you're right. This whole show is them just saying like, well, we have to arrange travel plans.
Yeah.
I'll get on Travelocity. Can somebody get on Kayak really quick and figure out what the next flight is? I need you to swim, Aquaman. Okay. Like that's all it was. It was unnecessary planning. And I felt like I was pained at the end of it, because I sometimes have a hard time like booking travel and stuff like that. For me, it can be a real pain in the ass.
Real flashback for you.
Yeah, there were flashbacks to me. Yeah. Like watching them do this, I was like, this is killing me. But Joe,
this leads to my favorite part of the whole episode, which was they have to go to the circus. Marvin and them have to go to the circus, and they're going to these different places. And Wonder Woman is assigned here. Batman and Robin are assigned to go to Africa in the helicopter. And then they assign Wendy and Superman and Marvin to go to the circus. And Robin literally goes, man, I wish I could go to the circus. And he's like, I remember when my parents were killed at the circus and I was a circus performer. And Batman goes, well, too bad. We already planned this out. Let's go. And he leaves. And it was the dickest move ever.
So, go ahead,
okay,
Dave.
So Tony knows what I'm going to say. So there's an amazing back and forth bit of dialogue between these two here. And to Joe's point from earlier on, it's almost as if the writers either it's their first time reading and writing about these heroes, or they think that it's the kids' first time like ever meeting any of these heroes. So they have to like introduce these weird little quirks of like their character backstories or their origins or like their formative moments. So everybody's getting their assignments and whatever. And then Robin pipes up and he's like, I'd sure like to go to the circus for old time's sake. And then he like looks dead at the camera and is like, I was a circus performer until my parents were killed and Batman took me in. To which Batman then turns to him and he's like smiling. He's like, yeah, what a great memory. And then he's like, and you taught me a few tricks on the trapeze. And I just fucking lost it at that point. Like, what are you two talking about? Like, this is terrible.
I took the note on here of that exact line and then put the note next to it. This is the moment most where I was like, I heard ambiguously gay duo.
I love that they bonded over the death of this kid's parents, his orphaning, as it were.
And if you watch the later shows, it just gets worse from here. Like, it's terrible. Like, they're in caves together and just like, no problem. But I just thought, like, he's like, hey, here's this painful childhood memory. And he's like, sucks to be you. We're going to Egypt. Get in the car.
Get in the copter.
So, like,
I almost would have liked if they had just done a round table then for everybody in that room, and Batman had been like, well, my parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne, were gunned down in Crime Alley by Joe Chill, and I'm still going to therapy to recover from that fact. And just Superman was just like, my father died on the planet where I was born with my mother.
Yeah, but why
and
give
just
Superman
like gone around the
3
room
seconds to say that when you can devote 25 minutes to his entire origin story in the middle of this episode?
Jesus.
Which they do.
They did.
That was the biggest unnecessary. This show meandered. It was like, you know what? We're on a trajectory, but fuck it. And they just decided to just be like, you know what? We have 43 minutes. Let's fill in whatever we want. How about a Superman origin story? And you're like, no, I don't need that, Dave.
But before we even get to that point, I need to maybe that explains Superman's terrible parenting skills. Because I think I want to give Tony a chance. Because I think he talked about this before. So everybody's gone to their different places around the globe. Superman is tagging along with these kids at the circus. What's their, as Clark Kent, what's their relationship like at the circus?
It's very much, he just deposits them out in the world. he's just like, and my favorite is later on when he's left them and gone back to the home base, and what is it called again? Fuck,
Hall of Justice.
Hall of Justice.
I don't even think, to be fair, I don't think it's called that in this specific episode. Yeah.
So they go back to he goes back to the Hall of Justice, and they ask him point blank. They're like, "Hey, where are the kids at?" And he goes, I wrote down the line because this is great. No doubt they're having a lot of fun right now on one of those wild rides. And I'm like, you can fucking fly.
Can I just say this, though?
Did you leave the kids there?
He left the kids there, but he didn't just do it because there was a world-ending threat or something. He did it because he just flew around, gathered a shitload of balloons, and then flew home. The weirdest fucking scene of the whole thing. He just Superman fly with a bunch of balloons, leaving orphan kids behind him at the circus.
So the context behind the balloons is that the bad guys were stealing the diamonds using ray guns hidden inside of balloons.
Those were the decoy balloons that they call the decoy balloons.
And they actually, one of my other questions is, they're like, catapult the balloons. And it's like, how do you catapult the balloon? You just let it go. It's full of air. Just let the balloon go. They were like, catapult the balloons. And Superman was like, gotta get these balloons. It was like he was on a side quest in some fucking 90s video game where you have to collect all the balloons, otherwise you can't make it to Banjo-Kazooie's castle. So
I also want to bring up just about these balloons. There are multiple times where we have our villains, where we have our doctor. He's saying,
"Damn it,
red balloon, to make sure that the red balloon is focused on the big top." There is not a single fucking red balloon. They are blue, they are green, and they are yellow. There is not a single red balloon in this entire show.
And my favorite part of that is, he goes, make sure you put another red balloon. And the other guy, Harry or whatever the fuck his name was, Wilbur, he goes, I know, I'll put it on the red balloon. Like, he catches an attitude with him, and there's still no red balloon.
And he strings out 3 orange balloons back to back, and everybody on the show counts them.
Oh
1, 2.
Yeah, and that was another part of the plot that I really had a big problem with, is that they are watching crimes happen, and at one point Superman's like, hey, your diamond's getting stolen right off your neck, and doesn't do anything about it.
And his catchphrase is up and away in these, by the way.
Yeah. And then he goes, they're releasing all the balloons, and Superman is literally watching them release the balloons. And because he's going 8, 9, 10 balloons, and you're just like, you're Superman, right? Like, you have powers, and you could do anything. And the only power Superman uses the whole time is his X-ray vision.
Yeah.
And maybe he flies.
And his superior intellect. I need to mention, so it's bad enough that Superman leaves these kids, one who's possibly special, alone in a circus full of villains with laser balloons. We should also mention, as the narrator likes to remind us multiple times through bouts of exposition throughout this 43 minutes, that because of the chaos that is happening, some elephants break free of their chains and stampede. When they stampede, they crash into a cage and they free a gorilla. So Superman not only left these kids with the villains who are stealing these diamonds and are about to embark on a interplanetary adventure, he also leaves them with stampeding elephants and a gorilla that's on the loose. I just wanted to make sure that we knew just how vile that decision actually was.
The friendliest possible gorilla, because the gorilla walks up and plays a carnival game. And the kid does the total. This is where I was like, this is the 3 kids are Shaggy, Scooby, and Velma at this moment, because he does the whole blah, 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 and then does the pew little sound effect as he runs away from something that is not in the least bit scary whatsoever. But it's very much like Magilla Gorilla. Like, they took Magilla Gorilla's body and they just put a very generic gorilla head on it.
Do you remember the phrase that our Do you remember the phrase that our special needs superhero says when he turns around and sees the gorilla? He goes, "Zoinkers!"
No, he did not.
Yes, he
Son of a
did.
bitch. I knew that. I knew
Yes,
that
he
a minute
did.
before that.
Zoinkers!
A minute before that, he said he was going to take another turn, but he's like, "I'll let my friend here in the fur coat take a turn." It's like, God damn it, I hate this show. Always with those jokes. And you knew, like just Tony just mentioned, you knew that follow-up joke was coming a second later. You knew once that moment of recognition drilled into his brain. Yeah.
This is sort of the heist portion of the show. Are there any additional questions that we need to get answered about this heist before we move on to this origin story? So go ahead, Tony.
Why the hell do we need to know the carrot rating of every single diamond in this stupid show? And repeated over and over again.
Important.
I know 210, 120, and 100 carats were the 3 diamonds that we got to follow along throughout the course of this. Why the hell does that matter?
I think a deeper question is, why does the Justice League give a damn about diamonds? Like, this seems like a local police matter or FBI thing at best. And not only are they like, the Trouble Alert computer alerted them that a diamond was stolen, but they immediately knew the location of other diamonds that had previously been stolen. Like, everybody knew everything, and they were like, yep, these diamonds. It's like, this is 73. This is like Vietnam era. Like, there's other stuff they could be doing at this point, and they're like, we're going to go solve a local crime.
And that is the hackiest bunch of exposition in the entire show, is the moment where they describe all these other diamonds that have gone missing in exceptional detail. Like to be able to say, it was stolen from this organization in this city in this part of the world during this, like, I mean, it's just so...
Well, I love the fact that when they're explaining the diamonds, that the diamond that has been stolen, that they're alerted to by the Troubler, they're explaining all of this to this general that's on the computer screen, and he goes, aha. And Robin's like, so by saying aha, does this mean that this has happened before? And then everybody in the room is like, oh, well, I was tracking this other diamond. I was tracking this other diamond. Yo, that's all relevant information for a diamond theft that's all above 100 carats. Like, maybe, I don't know, don't patch this guy in on FaceTime. You could just have a little chit-chat between everybody who's in that room right there. Dave.
Can I just say, this is one of those, like, sins that I absolutely hate in any storytelling, whether it's animation, live action, movies, whatever. Essentially, the scene before, Superman shows up at the scene of the crime, explains what happened, someone stole your diamond, they replaced it with a fake one. We don't know why yet, but this is something we're looking into. The scene before this scene that we're talking about now. Cut to immediately, maybe there was a commercial in between, I don't know. Cut to immediately Colonel Wilcox holding this giant diamond, the fake one, and then literally just saying, beat for beat, what Superman just said. So what we know so far is someone stole the diamond and then replaced it with this relatively worthless zircon. Does that about sum it up? We're like, yeah, it just fucking summed it up. That was the last 5 minutes of this entire show that we just watched. There's no need. We didn't lose our minds over the commercial break and forget everything that happened in the previous 25 minutes. Like, we got it. We're on board. I hate stuff like that, where they just waste time just rehashing the same thing you just watched.
No, I mean, to everybody's point.
Wait, can I just point out that's this entire show, like that you two
Over.
do? Okay.
Overnight. Every week. 179 times.
At the point where at the point where, like, this is nothing but travel planning and just recapping on everything that just happened 2 seconds prior to this. So we have all of this information, and we kind of get to the point where we have our 2 kids and our dog that are on a spaceship that are being taken away by our villains. And this is the point where we learn that they're not stealing the diamonds because they intend to return them once they've shattered this planet, taken its resources, and brought them to Earth to benefit mankind. And so this is the point where we have our ugly villain, Ugly Face Wilbur, is saying, where he prompts a little bit more about Superman. And this is sort of when we get into and we meander over to this origin
Wilbur's a
story.
fanboy.
So I want to ask,
a Superman fanboy. I don't know where that came from.
This was an unexpected turn of events to have him fanboy so hard with this.
Yeah, at one point they're like, I would want to do anything to piss off Superman, roughly.
Oh my god, the exact line. Do you remember the exact line?
No, I don't.
I think it's.
I was kind of fading in and out.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I feel bad about so easily deceiving the Super Friends.
Well, that was great
No,
too. He's
you
like, I didn't
don't.
think Superman was such a dummy. No, Marvin and Wendy, they learn the plan, and they're like, if Superman's your idol, then you'd better not break up a planet. He won't like it. And the other one's like, yeah, because that's what happened to his planet a long time ago. Like, fuck. You knew you were getting into an origin story once they dropped that line.
And then it turns into a 20-minute origin story of Superman where we learn all about the backstory and then also that Superman's original mom is kind of a moron because there was a second seat in the ship and she's like, I'm not going to go. It'll be better if I stay here with you.
So let me interject really quick and say, Joe, that the reason that she says this in the justification in the show is she's be like, because of my weight, our son will have a better chance of traveling to his destination if I don't ride with him.
Right.
And so this is quite possibly the second time that people have either indirectly body shamed themselves or body shamed another person, because in the spaceship where we have Wonder Mutt at some point, they say to him, they're just like, you can't eat all that steak. You need to go on a diet. You're getting too fat. And I'm just like, wait, is that a severe problem for this dog?
That's also how they end the show with, do you want to get fat, dog?
Yep.
And it's like, oh, God, leave the fucking dog alone. He solved your crime.
Yeah.
I will
Dave.
say, yeah, body shaming for Wonder Dog or whatever his name is. Not for Superman's mom, though. I think they just had to find a way to write her out of being able to come to Earth with him. Otherwise, that would throw off his entire origin from the last 60 years. It was a silly way to put it, but at least they tried to make it seem pseudo-scientific by saying, like, her added weight for the calculations, like, they would throw things off. It was crap, but they should have just made it like a tiny little prototype that only fit a baby, because why wouldn't you make that? Yeah, I don't know. It was pretty dumb.
I have no idea.
But it's also like, well, I'm just going to send this baby off
Right.
and hopefully it's fine.
Right.
And it's like, what?
That's where
It's
Superman.
bad parenting
That's
that
where
he's
Superman
learning
got
about.
his parenting.
That's not how that works. That's what. Yeah, Superman is basically the equivalent of like some dude who's just having sex with like Marvin's mom and just took him out to the circus and just went out like and just went drinking afterwards. You know, he's not even a stepdad. Like he's not even there. He's just like, yeah, I'll take your kid out, and then he just like went and hit the bars
Drops him at the circus
for a
yeah.
while. Right.
So I want to ask a big question about the origin story portion of this, because what has happened is that there are these earthquakes that are on Krypton, and they assembled this science league together, and they're just like, you know what? And all of the earthquakes have subsided, and then people leave, and then they reassemble, and then they're kind of calling out like heresy and sort of like treasonous activity for like potentially researching and looking more into the science, where people are just like, no, we've got this, we're done with it. And it culminates with this line where one of the council members just simply says, do you see doom? And then immediately the earthquakes start back up again. So I want to know, we'll go around the horn on this one. I want to know, what line do you personally want to say where something like tragic and earth-shattering is about to happen? Like, what's the thing that you would just be like, and this is the line that all of a sudden initiates the end of days? Joe.
So the line that basically is like, I say it and then it happens? Well, fuck.
Tony.
I have no clue. I was not anticipating
No, I
this at
got
all.
nothing.
You got nothing? Yeah. I'm. I got nothing.
The only thing.
No,
yeah.
I'm still locked in here because of Mia and
Yeah.
Lodi. They were so on board to help Jor-El. They just abandoned
Oh, they
him.
backed out.
Oh, they
Yeah.
jumped ship first.
So fuck you, Mia and Lodi.
I
How
like
about
that.
that?
I'll
Dave-
echo Tony's. No, it just reminded me of that like Twilight Zone episode. Your quest reminded me of the Twilight Zone episode where the dude was like, I think he's like he's like trapped on the planet by himself. He's like the last person ever, and all he wanted this whole time is to like have time to himself to like read a book or whatever.
Oh, Time Enough at Last.
Is that what it was?
That's the name of the episode. Time Enough at Last. Yeah.
And then the very last thing that happens, he like steps on his glasses or his glasses break or something, right? And like
Yep.
that's the
Yep.
big twist. Like he
There
has
was time
he has
now.
all that time in the world, but he physically like can't see in order to read his books. And that's what it felt like to me. Like I felt like I would have something in my life that I've been like working for a long time, and then I'd finally like be like, I can finally relax and breathe, and then the world would just shake apart. That's where my mind went anyway.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Mine's a little bit, I guess, more dark and foreboding. I would definitely want to be there and say, like, as foretold in the prophecies. And
You
then,
went full biblical.
Yeah.
You went full biblical.
There's somebody in the room going, there were no prophecies. What is he? Oh, fuck.
Oh yeah, I guess you're right.
No fact checking.
No time now?
on that.
But I feel like it'll be really like, we got this under control. It's going to be tremendous. We got it taken care of. And then everything ends. What? Oh, too political? Too political? Sorry.
I feel like
boy.
my last
So,
line pre-apocalypse would have been, "We should have rented air-cooled camels."
Oh, God. I wrote that one down, too.
All right. Any questions that we have that we need to get answered about this origin story, which is
Why was it
arguably the worst? Yeah.
All right, so we have a super intelligent super scientist in theory, who is then told the basically complete origin story about Superman, including where he ends up landing and his parents' names, first and last name for both of them, Jonathan and Martha Kent, and they get up to the point where they go, "Oh, we should name him after your family." The doctor goes, "And what name was that?" And the kid goes, "That's top secret." And I'm like, but you gave him enough information to just zero in. It's the child in Kansas, the son of Martha and Jonathan Kent. You can probably cross-reference and figure out his fucking
It's
Clark.
1973. Grab a
Also
phone
there-
book and you'll figure it out. Yeah.
Also, there's this whole, like, they bring him to an adoption
Yes.
clinic.
Yeah.
And then he starts throwing, Superman starts throwing around as a baby the doctors at the adoption clinic, and so they just give him back. Like, nobody questions any of this.
But do you know the line before they take him into like the nursery at the adoption agency, where they say to him, or they say to the, like, looking at the nurse, they say, "Take the child to the dispensary."
Yeah.
That weirded me out.
Dave,
Can
what's
I
up?
also say, all right, the Kents were worried. They initially were just going to like keep the baby, but then they were like, no, people would ask too many questions. They'd run a million tests on him, and he'd be like the subject to all these experimentations. So that's why they took him to the orphanage. But they're riding around with a fucking alien rocket ship in the back of their pickup truck, like through Smallville.
Yes,
Like that's not
yes.
going to raise any questions.
I wrote that down. Well, and then the best part is when they see the rocket ship. That's a rocket ship straight out of the funny papers. Like, but and yet they've got this. The rocket ship is larger than the pickup truck. I don't know how he managed to load that thing on while they're wearing their Sunday
Right,
best,
right.
no less. And they go straight to the adoption agency and apparently hang out just long enough with the rocket ship still in the back of the truck. And then as they're riding home, they have the conversation. We should hide this so no one knows.
And taking no precautions
Jonathan
for
Kent.
radiation whatsoever.
Real, like, master of the understatement. Like,
I want to point out that there was a moment in here that seemed like it was a slight departure from some of the other things that we had seen. We're now squarely in the middle of the adoption portion of this episode. But as we've mentioned, these doctors are trying to understand this child that's throwing people around. And there's this moment where suddenly, like, I think it was one of the nurses of the doctors turns around to look at what young Superman has done. And the Foley or sound effects that they used for his eyes were kind of like the equivalent of saying zoinkers. Like, it was like bloop. And like people would like turn around and be like, whoa, like the entire time. It was so weird. It was like they were trying to indicate some type of a double take or like real honest surprise, but nobody else at any point in time during this show, even like our junior super friends and associates, like at no point did they make any of these like weird slapstick Foley eye movements, but it was comical to watch, and I kept laughing at it because they just kept doing it. Every time somebody looked at the baby, it was like they could not stop making it happen. It drove me crazy.
There was a lot wrong with that whole sequence.
Oh. Any other questions about adoption? just in general.
I love that they just gave
general
up.
adoption
They were like,
questions.
Look, this kid's real weird. We're just gonna give him back to the strangers that brought him in with a rocket ship in their car. Totally fine.
Yeah,
Walter.
this kid's a miracle of science. Let's just give him back to these hick farmers. I'm sure that'll go great.
I mean, so going back to another Hanna-Barbera property, they basically made him Bam Bam.
Yeah,
So he was like, maybe Superman was Bam Bam. Like,
basically.
From Flintstones? Yeah.
Maybe he's...
Yeah. It's basically the same concept.
So we're now really at the portion of this episode where we've wandered down a beaten path that nobody wanted to go on for over 23 minutes. We've now circled back to the spaceship where our junior super friends are still moving forward to potentially get dropped off at any bus depot that's in the United States. Dave, go ahead.
And I just want to point out that all of our heroes at this point, pretty much all they've done is fly or swim to a place, back home, and then to that place again for whatever reason. I love that Superman took his balloons home, called everybody in from four corners of the earth, and then sent them right back out. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, well, and my favorite part is that then when he goes back, he returns to London. And we know it's London because when we get to the exterior shot at London, we hear dun 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 dun. I wrote down London music.
The London music.
My sheet when that gets up. That's how
That
you know it's
theme
London.
greets you every time you enter the city of London. Yeah.
It's weird to touch down in Heathrow and just have them be like dun 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 dun
Every
dun,
time.
dun 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 dun.
Every
Yeah,
time for
flawless.
every person.
They
It's
t-
exhausting.
Pilots really hate
They
it.
do a great job of intake and really making you feel like this is an experience to be in London, England.
Well, it's like when they went to Egypt and they were immediately standing outside of pyramids
On camels.
on camels.
They also have no concept of like a tropey equivalent music for Egypt, like because they had. What
What do you want, like a sitar?
Yeah, sitar playing or
It
whatever.
wouldn't even be sitar. It
Walk
would've
Like
been
an Egyptian wasn't a song yet.
Yeah.
No, it's that da 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 da. Like there's
Like a
Oh, like the
Scheherazade or something.
yeah,
they didn't
like
have
the
any of
snake
that
coming
stuff
out
that
of
are,
the thing.
Yeah, the like typical Egyptian tropes, and so they just played this weird soundtrack that had nothing to do with anything and had.
It was
I wish
Russia.
I would have written down what instruments, but they had a couple instruments. I feel like they had like a banjo or something that was just completely out of place for Egypt, and
The
like that's the
Egyptian
soundtrack
banjo,
they
I
go
love
to
it.
after.
You're like, okay,
Yeah, no, this is great. We'll work with
cool.
it. Yeah. All right, so but everybody's back together. Yeah.
Yeah, we get everybody finally back together. We're towards the very end of this now. They're working towards getting to this conclusion. I want to go with final questions that you would have about this area that we've deemed as the worst part of the scientific method.
Sure. So, just very quickly, two quick things. One, why has ever anyone let Marvin around any sort of secret information ever? Because he's clearly a rat or does not know OPSEC at all. Two, no one notices that these guys are flying around in a flying saucer. Like,
Yeah.
what's going on here?
Well, nobody's giving a shit that the Clarks have been driving around with a spaceship in the back of their truck,
It's like-
presumably 3 decades earlier.
Yeah, I mean, like, now I would get it. Everybody's head's in their phone when they walk. But, like, back then, people had to look up once in a while. And it's just like, where did these guys get a flying saucer from? And then their master plan is to rip apart a planet and then drag it around the orbit of the Earth.
Half of it,
Just
not the whole
Half
thing.
of it. That would be
Not great.
ridiculous. That would be, you got to save some for
right.
later. So using the diamonds to create a laser to break up a planet and then pull it down, nothing could go wrong. And even the girl, Wendy, is basically like, no, that'll kill everyone with the tides and avalanches. And the doctor's like, no, it won't. I'm a doctor. Like, we've done tests on it. And it's like, no, you haven't, dude. If the girl who's like 15, I'm going to say 18 because it makes me feel
you go.
better about my earlier comments. If she's figuring it out with no scientific background and her special needs friend, then, like, I think it's okay. to like just really believe her at this point. At least run some tests. And then he goes off and he's like, why don't you just ask Superman if this is okay? And he's like, no. The scientist literally goes, no. Everyone else has told me no in my life. Like, and everyone has turned me down. The scientific community thinks I'm a joke. And it's like, well, maybe you are, sir. Like, maybe you're the common denominator here. So he didn't really think it through.
The weird thing with that is that it seems like at one point the writers, this is probably giving them too much credit, but it seems like they wanted to tie that back to the thing on Krypton where the scientists didn't trust Jor-El. But the fact that it like is a completely flipped story anyway, because this guy was a crackpot, it makes no sense.
I think you're reaching with that.
I mean, they could
I
have
see.
done
I
that.
see the parallel.
They could have done that, but they decided not to. What other questions? do we
Tony,
have?
what questions do you have?
So this is more in the chase scene that ensues afterwards, after they realize that, oh no, Wilbur has double crossed us and has stolen has double swapped the diamonds for additional fakes, and Superman just figures this out because Superman's fucking brilliant apparently. But so he's on the run. So and they go, where would he have gone? And he goes, I know where he went. The subterranean coal mine tunnels, because apparently in Hanna-Barbera world there are coal mine tunnels everywhere. That I honestly think this is going political again. This is where Trump has got this idea that somehow saving all the coal mine jobs is going to bring America back.
Oh,
again,
I thought you
they're
meant it's where he. Yeah, I thought you meant it's
everything.
where he had the idea that the entirety of the country is just littered with mining tunnels that he can take a little cart
That's what I
ride
mean.
on.
Yeah. And so that too. Well, but that leads to another tropey thing they do in every fucking Hanna-Barbera thing, which is that you have to have some sort of a coal mine chase with those stupid little carts from a sideways view, and it's another one of those animation things that probably takes like 2 seconds to animate, but you can have it take up like 20 seconds and play like thrilling music over it on the actual screen. But yeah, the minecart ride, that was the last thing that I was like, fuck this show.
Well, I mean, all Hanna-Barbera cartoons take place in central Pennsylvania. So it makes sense.
All in Centralia.
Yeah,
Centralia.
in
They're all
Centralia.
in,
That's how
Carbon
those
County.
fires
Yeah.
started.
Centralia.
Yeah, that's how those fires started.
It's all the Lackawanna.
Dave,
coal
what
mine.
final questions are you trying to get answered?
I mean, you guys kind of asked them. The only thing I would say is like, why don't our superheroes actually do anything? Aquaman does literally nothing except swim back and forth. Wonder Woman, like Tony mentioned, transports him back and forth. Batman and Robin do butt stuff, like in the air and in Egypt, I guess, and on the trapeze. Superman's the only one who kind of does something, but even at the end, he just kind of like arrests the doctor very gently and just walks him away. They don't do anything. The kids are the only ones who do anything. So why are we here? What
So
are
I
we
think
doing?
that this you bring up a great point, and this brings me to the final two questions that I have for this show. Is that I really think that we could have just called this show Friends.
Sure.
There's nothing super about anything
Justice
that's in here.
Friends.
It just should have been called, Justice Friends, or it just should have just been called people who are associated with one another and sometimes hang out. But that's kind of too long.
Acquaintances.
But Tony, you got a question?
Wilbur at one point says, when they're flying around with the two kids, that he goes, wait a minute, you kids are friends with the super friends? And then they go, of course we're friends with the super. They say the word friends like 5 times in like a line and a half, and I wanted to scream.
And then he did.
So my final question that I have for this episode is, Wilbur is now apprehended thanks to the hydraulic lift that's in the back of this circus truck that's in there. And we have our Wonder Pup who's on top of it, so they're kind of giving him credit for the
thanks
arrest.
to all the kids. Our
I
simple
wanna
friend
know-
pulled that switch. It was all the kids and the dog.
Right. So now that Wilbur has been caught and he's come face to face with Superman, do you think he got an autograph? Do you think he completely fanboyed out and achieved that dream of like getting a photograph or some type of an autograph from Supes? Or do you think that Supes was just like, I'm just going to drop you off in jail because that's what I
Hold
do?
on. Are you suggesting that this entire scheme from Wilbur's point of view was just to meet Superman?
Correct.
I think no, he doesn't get an autograph because the illusion of movement would take too much time out of Hanna-Barbera's schedule. And they're like, nope, forget that.
I like to picture
Just have him
Superman.
talk to somebody behind him.
I like to picture Superman just like burning his symbol, his S symbol, into like one of the fake diamonds and just handing it to Wilbur. And like, there you go. That's all you get.
Take that to jail with you. The guy I feel bad for is the scientist, not Wilbur. The scientist who, A, thought that he created a method to destroy a planet and then pull it down, and then B, was going through it for the benefit of mankind. And then not only is he stopped, but he's like, Superman's like, no, oh, your stuff was wrong anyway. Wilbur faked it. And he's just like, what? Like,
It's really sad.
The world was shattered at that moment.
I've kind of devoted my entire life to doing this. Like, I was solving your energy problems. Too bad.
This is a very future forward show because they did recognize the scarcity of resources and the lengths at which we are considering in order to try and replace them, and also the fact that you could never make money as a news writer, that you had to be a TV commentator because that's what Clark Kent's job
Galaxy
was for
TV.
Galaxy Communications.
I also want to point out that this show, 43 minutes, unbelievably anticlimactic.
And that's with the dog eating steak.
Yeah.
This was 43 minutes of somebody with a plan and a backstory and an adoption that took
And it's
place,
called Planet
and then suddenly
Splitter.
realizing, right? And there is no planet splitting.
No
You get to
action.
the there's no action. There is nothing, and you get to the very end, and they're just like, "Oh, your science sucks," and that's
And can
it.
I say that the only reason that intro, that background origin story for Superman even played out, that was the reason for them to take that like trip around the solar system and just like pop by Cygnus Uno and come back. They didn't do anything there. They just popped by the planet and then came back just to give the kids 23 minutes to tell this origin story. So stupid.
Joe, final thoughts.
Jeez. It was awful. They should have just put like cop shirts on everybody and was like, here's a story about well-funded cops.
Well,
know?
we're gonna get to our recommendations in a bit, but any final
Okay.
thoughts about the episode in general?
I've seen the other episodes and they all are of at least the first season before it was canceled and redubbed. They're all like this. So if you're wondering if we just picked the worst episode of the bunch, no, they're pretty much exactly like that. And then I also like that the fact that the only superpower we saw at all were Aquaman swimming, which I mean anyone can swim for the most part.
Again, just friends.
Yeah, friends. And Superman flew to collect balloons. So there you go.
And
That
his
was the
X-ray
big
vision.
action.
X-ray vision, that's about it.
And his X-ray vision, right? And his X-ray vision.
Right.
So really, you could have just with a helicopter or a kite.
Okay.
So,
Man. So before we get into our recommendations for this cartoon, hey, guess what? Turns out people of the internet, you guys have additional opinions, and so we like to dig in and get into some of these. And so now we're gonna hand this over to longtime listener and friend of the show, Bobby Anthem, for this week's Love It or Hate It. Bobby, take it away.
Your Love It this week was written by SteeBear4 from the United States on October 28th, 2016. It was given a rating of 10 out of 10. It's titled A Comedy Adventure Series Among Other Possibilities, and I will be reading it exactly as it was written. Yes, I'm giving credit where it's due. This was acknowledged in the TV Guide as a comedy adventure series. In episode number 1, Batman says Robin, Superman, Aquaman to the Batmobile, of which is very heart-touching because of that famous quote from the 1960s TV show. And 7 years later, when I saw in the comic of World's Finest number 90, this similar scene in which Superman is flying the Batmobile with Batman, Robin, and Batwoman in it. Also in this first episode, we see Superman flying some super friends as passengers in two of hands and maybe one on his back, and saying he's flying them, as he said, courtesy of Superman Airlines. In one hand, as I recall, he's holding Batman with Wendy in his lap. Truthfully, Steve G. Bear, a.k.a. Stee, of Framingham, Massachusetts, USA. And your Hate It was written on August 7th, 2017 by OTWOD, Otwad from Butttown. Really? Okay. He titled it Truly Awful. gave the show a rating of 2 out of 10 and said, "This show is a terrible interpretation of the Justice League. I suspect that all the ridiculous changes and the fact that they didn't call the show the Justice League was a sad attempt to make it more kid-friendly." Imagine that. They thought that they needed to make a children's comic book more kid-friendly. There's so many things wrong with this show that it's hard to point them all out, but I will try. The worst thing is that they added 2 kids and their dog. None of them have any superpowers and can do nothing to help the Super Friends. Yet, time and again, they somehow manage to save the day. It seems very Scooby-Doo-ish. They attempt to add the comic relief, and the stupid dog even looks at the camera when someone makes a terrible joke. It's extremely hard to watch. One thing that is unforgivable is that there are no villains in the entire series. It's always just a regular person who thought he was doing the right thing. Every episode ends with that person learning an important life lesson, and no one goes to jail. To make things even worse, the episodes are an hour long. That could have been a good thing, but it's not. Half of every episode is just filler. They could have easily been cut down to 15 minutes with nothing missing. Another huge mistake they made was having Casey Kasem do 90% of the voices on the show. He doesn't even try to change his voice. It's just sad. I won't even mention all the plot holes and on-screen spelling mistakes. I hope the other Super Friends series are better.
Fan-freaking-tastic. Awesome. Thank you for being such a super friend to us, Bobby
Nice.
Anthem. We appreciate it. You have more superpowers than anybody that's in this damn show that we watched tonight. So we're now gonna go. Around and we're gonna check out recommendations. Or if you don't recommend this show, you have the opportunity to give it the dip. If you're not familiar with the dip, it is the dip from Roger Rabbit, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which means that if you put it in the dip, you erase it from the annals of cartoon history. And so we have this opportunity to either recommend, not recommend it, and if you don't recommend it, you can dip it. We'll start with Joe.
So I'm going to not recommend it, but I'm not going to give it the dip because I feel like it is necessary to show us where we have been in the past and how terrible and far we have come. But I will recommend a show called Justice League Action, which is currently on, I think it's Cartoon Network. It's on at like 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays, where basically they take the Justice League and it's the exact opposite of this show. This show is all about logistics. That is like, all right, you're in the middle of a fight between Superman and Darkseid, go. And then it's a 12-minute long show, and it's just about the action and the fight sequences, and they tell a coherent story while doing the fight sequences. It's very, very good.
Awesome. Tony.
For this one, I'm gonna go same route as Joe. I'm not gonna give it the dip, not because I feel like it's necessary for the canon or the world there, so much as it is necessary for parody. Because ambiguously gay duo, I owe to shows just like this existing. Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. Like we owe to these shows being as terrible and tropey and dumb as they were, and being all over our TV screens when we were younger. Giving us the basis for these other shows that are epically funny because of it. So can't give it the dip, but definitely do not recommend. Don't waste your time. This was 3 episodes combined into one, all of which would have sucked. So yeah, not worth it.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. Dave, what are your thoughts and feelings?
Yeah, I'm with these guys. I'm not going to recommend it, but I can't give it the dip for the same reasons they've already said.
Yeah. Hey, guys, we are 4 for 4 on this. This is a big do not watch this. Save your time and your energy. This is also coming out. This episode, obviously, if you're listening to this comes out in within the next week. You are going to see Justice League in theaters. So also maybe save your time there. I don't know. I've heard early rumors that the entire script is based off of Planet Splitter episode and inspired by it. So just a heads up. So
Although I will give this show credit for the countless Aquaman is the worst character ever.
They really did ruin his
Memes.
reputation. Yeah.
They totally ruined his reputation. I mean, if you look at the difference between Namor,
Yeah.
who is basically Aquaman, an earlier Aquaman from Marvel, and him, Namor is like the Vladimir Putin to this Theresa May of an Aquaman, where it's just awful.
Well, I thought it was really funny that every time Aquaman spoke in this, similar to Justice League, which is coming out in theaters, he just kept saying "my man" and like nonstop. It was like snap into a Slim Jim like the entire time. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Didn't know that they got the voice of Macho Man Randy Savage to do this.
Yeah.
Guys.
Yeah.
So we are now at
Half human.
we are now at the end of the show. and
Snap
so-
into a seahorse.
Snap into a seahorse.
I saw.
I heard Snap It
So,
to a sequel. I like
complete-
that better.
Complete side story. I saw Randy Savage in the airport in Tennessee. Obviously
Before he died?
Before he passed,
Hopefully,
he
yeah.
and
Another
his wife
ghost
were walking
story,
through.
yeah.
And I thought he was like Sergeant Slaughter and all those, where the voice was just a put on for the show itself. But I didn't see him at first. I heard him coming down the way because I hear him. We're gonna miss our flight.
no.
Like I mean, it's still one of my favorite things that I was like, huh? Like I'm looking out the window and I had this like Spidey sense that like Randy Savage is behind me somewhere.
Oh yeah, window seat. Cool.
Yeah, I'd like some extra peanuts.
See, I would watch this cartoon.
I would watch this
I would
cartoon
watch
in a
this
heartbeat. Oh,
Just
God.
traveling with
So
Savage. Yeah.
we want to thank Tony Lazzaroni for coming back on the show, and we also want to thank Joe Randazzo. So we just kind of want to give you guys an opportunity. What do you have that's coming up, something that you would like to plug, and where can people, if you would like them to, find you on social media? Where can they find you?
I am not on social media. I get in trouble. I do. It's a thing. So I am not on social media, but I am doing a show called Citizens Watch starting in December. It is based off of the show Broadchurch, the BBC mystery show. It is a murder improv show, dramatic improv show. And then I'm also have my other troops, Jive Turkey, Four Heads, and Sistine Robot.
Yeah.
So we're all doing shows throughout December at Washington Improv Theater.
And we will have links to this on our website. It's witdc.org for any of the tickets and times to be able to find Joe performing over the month of December. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
Tony,
for
what
having
do you
me.
got going on?
So I'm actually helping out with Citizens Watch as well. Not on stage like Joe. I'm doing the non-illustrious behind-the-scenes work, doing some tech work for them.
God's
but, I will be a part of those shows as well. What's that?
God's work.
God's work. I am the god in the show. I get to turn out the lights. No, actually, I get to do the sound effects to somebody else turning out the lights. It sounds dumb now. But I'm also in a troupe called Trust Fall. We perform on a regular basis. In fact, we've got a monthly show called Trust Fall and Friends here in the DC area on one Monday each month. I think it's on the 13th, if I remember right, this month. It's either that or the 19th. One of the two. Something like that. Then in addition to that, I will also be performing with them as part of Washington Improv Theater's Seasonal Disorder Run coming up at the end of the year. Find out more about that at witdc.org.
Awesome. Dave, what do you got going on, buddy?
Same old shit. You can find me on Twitter at DrClawMD. You can also check me out on Collider.com, Nerdist.com, and DaveTrumbore.com. What about you, Shawnee?
Guys, as always, I perform in Washington, D.C. with a group that's called Nox. That's N-O-X exclamation point. And like Tony and Joe, we are going to have all of our tickets and times and availability that are up on witdc.org. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Sean Paul Ellis.
If you'd like to find out more about Saturday Morning Cartoons, you can do so at our website, SaturdayMorningCartoons.com. Remember, that's morning with a U. You can also follow us on Twitter at MorningToons. Check out Sean's handiwork and possibly Tony's additions on our Instagram page. Keep the conversation going on Facebook. And listen to our free audio podcast each and every week through YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. As always, if you want to reach out to us, you can do so through email, SaturdayMorningCartoons@gmail.com. And if you want to know what's coming up next on the show and also to kick in a little bit of help for us to improve it as well, head on over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/SaturdayMorningCartoons. Anything else, Sean? I think that's going to do it for this week. Thanks, you guys, again.
Yeah, thank you to Joe. Thank you to Tony for being here. That's going to wrap it up for this week. We're going to be back next week. The month of November is going to be all guest requests as well as also our listener requests. So we're going to be back next week with a listener request. So tune in for that. As foretold by the prophecy.
Well, fuck.
Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Hey, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening to Saturday Morning Cartoons. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to transform and roll out.